Hey, it's a Tuesday, and it's in February the 27th, and we have full story stuff today. Those of you who are still taking grammar quiz, we have next grammar quiz tomorrow. It's the exact same sentences as last time. I just changed which words it is. Our first actual Greek mythology quiz comes up this Friday, so we can finally go over some of the stuff, and then again, can't tea things. Excuse me. Turn them in as you can this week. Charger Challenge is, as of now, filled at 15 people. Let's see. Crawford, you're good after school?
Yep.
Felipe's going to come back and talk to me. Matthew, you're good?
Yeah.
Rahil's good?
Yep.
And then Reese is good. I talked to your coach. They said you're fine. So they said you're good to go for us if you
Wait,
want.
bro, how did Lucas make it?
And then Manasi, you're good? Yeah, you're just...
Yeah.
Okay. And that should, so those of you who signed up after school, put everything in locker, and then you just bring you down to cafeteria. And then after we get done, you go back to your locker and grab your stuff. Matthew.
Someone wrote a message just to remind me.
Okay.
May I do the same?
Sure. Did you need to contact your parent too?
That's my mom.
Uh-huh. Alright, so now we're good to go on that part. Yay. Alright. So yesterday, I think we had just begun the Athena story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to the part where you picnic, darkest place in the world.
That's what I thought.
The rainbow.
So then, see, I no longer have to cover those. I just put that up for kids who are dead. Speedy version of this goes in time. Iris comes from which god? Iris. And who does Iris work for?
Hera.
Because who is the other messenger?
Hermes.
Hermes. How do we know when Iris comes down?
Rainbow.
That was Rainbow. She was also the first snitch. Ooh, why is she a snitch?
Because
Zeus makes friends.
He's having a nice time at a lady's house.
They're not both
No,
friendly.
we should make
Good
them
stuff.
friends.
having a lot of fun.
Then definition of Iris is
The color of the flower.
and flower. And then picture.
It's actually that's not a girl. That's a girl.
My eyeball looks beautiful.
That's your girl. That's a girl.
Eyelash.
Music and museum comes from the muses. How many were there?
I can't assume.
What were they in control of?
The art.
And then let's see.
The arts and crafts.
Why did we have to have the muses?
So you can be creative.
Because humans are not creative at all.
Yeah,
So
that's
the-
CJ.
And then the idea of music is sound created by muses. Museum is just stuff that's all created by the muses. So all looking back to the muses. June comes from which god?
Hera.
Hera, whose Roman name was?
Juno.
Who was she married to?
Zeus.
The two things she was the god of.
Marriage and
Marriage
childbirth.
Why is it ironic she's the god of marriage?
Because she has
Horrible marriage and likes to kill babies.
And also likes to kill babies. Why is the month named after her?
Because they look at marriage.
And that's when we would get married. And then mind is connected to
The muses. Athena. Sorry.
whose Roman name was
Minerva.
close enough. Minerva.
Sorry.
And what was she the god of?
Wisdom and war and tactical
There
war.
you go. Wisdom and
And
smart war. And then we're also going to eventually get to weaving, but that'll be a thing we figure out later on.
Oh yeah.
And
She had a
that's
competition with
weaving.
the
It was important to them.
She had a competition. She survived.
So then that's where we got to her story, as we said, begins with which young boy?
Zeus.
Zeus, who is married to Hera. How does he celebrate his marriage?
Getting a girlfriend.
Do you remember the girlfriend's name?
No.
No, but it's a Titan.
Venus.
Metis. Nice little.
Nice job,
Metis. Metis. And let's see. Oh, she comes in with good news for Zeus, and the good news is,
She's pregnant.
and he cannot kill her to get rid of evidence. Why?
Because her and the baby are
Living person on
mortal.
a stick.
And if he sticks a stick through, then he's gonna have an angry girlfriend on a stick.
No one wants an angry girlfriend on a stick. Especially not a married guy. And so same thing with baby, then it's just angry baby on a stick, and that's almost as bad as an angry girlfriend. So he tells her that we're going to, what's his plan?
Picnic
Picnic.
in the
Dark
darkest
spot.
woods.
There we go. And that's where we had left off, where we get to begin with our story for today. So, at this point, he tells her, we're going to go for a picnic into the deepest, darkest, farthest back part of the woods. And when she questions, why does it have to be the darkest part of the woods? His response is,
It's romantic.
it's romantic. And she goes, "Aw," and he goes, "You bought that?" I mean, yes, of course it's romantic. And so the next day, he packs his little picnic basket full of Capri Sun and pretzels and ham sandwiches, and off they go into the deep, dark part of the backwoods. And things go well. They have their picnic, everyone eats, everything's delicious, things go great. The end of the whole picnic, Zeus has a plan. And he goes, Metis, I think we should play a game. She goes, I love games. What game are we going to play? He goes, I think we should play a game called Who Can Turn into the Smallest Animal. And here's a quick timeout. So the Greeks believed that Titans, not only were they immortal and lived forever, but they could also shapeshift into any person or animal that they wanted to. They couldn't really shapeshift into inanimate things like a rock, but any animal or living thing, they could whoop, and they would be that size. Like they could shapeshift into like a tiny little squirrel, or into a gigantic elephant, or into a titan. So he goes, all right, time back. Matei.
Isn't it true that how they look usually is actually shapeshift because their true form is little?
Yep, we'll get there. So now, he goes, all right, let's shapeshift into who can become the smallest animal, but to make it fun, let's start big, and then we just have to keep going a little bit smaller each time. And she goes, oh, okay. So he goes, I'll go first. Whoop, and he turns into an elephant. And she's like, oh, this is easy. And she goes, whoop, and turns into a hippopotamus. And he goes, I thought you were going to shapeshift. She goes, what? And he goes like, ha, ha, ha. And they keep going, keep going. Just saying who caught that one. And they keep going down from there into a deer, and then like a dog, and then a cat. They keep going smaller until they start getting down to like a squirrel, and then a mouse, and eventually they have to start going into insects, and start going all the way down until he turns into a fly and starts flying around. He's like, buzz, buzz, buzz. He's like, there's no way you can beat me. I turned into a fly. I'm obviously the winner. And she goes, wait a minute. I can beat you. So he turns back into his human form and goes, what are you going to do? And she goes, into a gnat, whoop, and goes even smaller than a fly. And she starts flying around him and going, me, 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 which is gnat talk. And she says, there is no way you can beat me. I have become the smallest thing possible. How are you going to win now? And he goes, this. And he reaches out of the air, snatches her, and goes, and swallows her. His thinking being, well, I can't stab her or the baby, but the least I can do is trap her so that now that she can never escape. And it turns out his plan is foolproof. And she disappears, never to be seen again in Greek mythology. Zeus packs up all of his little picnic stuff and then heads back out. And whenever someone asks about Metis, he was like, Metis, she went to go visit family over squirrel, and then he would take off running. And it would work every time. Years go by, and he has completely gotten away with this. Yeah, if you're trying to apply logic to this story, you're going to just roar right out the window, because logic is going to get a lot worse in just a moment. So, years and years go by, and Zeus rises up and becomes king of all the gods, and things are great, and him and Hera are good enough. Until one day, he's walking around Mount Olympus and gets the worst headache he's ever had. He says it feels like there is somebody on the front of his brain just punching his brain over and over again. He's like, I can't take it. He goes around like flipping over tables and goes and talks to other guys. He's like, someone bring me Tylenol. And they're like, we haven't invented that yet. He's like, no! And throws everything off the top of the desk. Till eventually, one of the gods comes up and goes, hey, buddy, can you relax a little? And he's like, my brain. They're like, hey, your son Hephaestus has invented a cure for headaches. Why don't you go talk to him? And he goes like, oh, good idea. So he goes down to inside the mountain where Hephaestus is currently working and goes and approaches Hephaestus, the guy that's right up there. And he goes, Hefe, I've heard that you have a cure for headaches. And Hephaestus is like, don't call me Hefe, that's weird. He's like, fine. What is your cure for headaches? And Hephaestus goes, well, I haven't actually tested it yet. It's just a theory, but I'm willing to give it a try for you. And Zeus goes, I don't care what it is. Let's do it. He goes, show me your cure. And Hephaestus goes, okay, it looks like this. He turns around and he pulls out a giant axe. And he goes, I call it an axe. And Zeus is like, oh, that's creative. And he goes, well, how does this axe thing work? And he goes, well, and Hephaestus brings over a chair. He goes, so what I'm going to need you to do is grab onto this chair and then lean your head over as far as you can. Zeus goes, uh-huh. He goes, then I'm going to back up a couple steps, with the axe, and I'm going to run at you as fast as I can, and then swing the axe into the top of your head. Zeus goes, I'm with you so far. He goes, I'm going to wiggle the axe back and forth as much as I can till there's a giant hole in your head, and then I'm going to reach inside and pull out whatever is giving you a headache. And Zeus looks at him and goes, that's genius. Okay, man. And Hephaestus is like, okay, this is great. He's like, so you just lean your head over there, and then I'm gonna solve this thing. He's like, it may hurt
Give me the stick.
You're gonna fall in.
a lot.
Wait, how can you run these stretches?
Can I be Let me get the stick. Oh.
And so he goes back,
Yeah, I
and
can do that.
he runs at him, but with his one leg, he just runs in circles. He's like, I'm gonna get to you eventually. And he gets all the way up to Zeus, whack, into the top of Zeus's head, wiggles it back and forth, makes a gigantic opening into the front of Zeus's head. And Zeus is like, what do you see? And Hephaestus goes, I don't know, it's empty. Zeus is like, what? He's like, brain joke. And he looks in there and starts poking inside of Zeus's brain. And all of a sudden, Hephaestus jumps back and screams like a little girl. He's like, Eee! And when he does, out of Zeus's head jumps a woman in full body armor with a shield and a sword and a spear, like a little action figure. And she goes, "Wah-twing!" and jumps out of his skull and lands between the two of them. And Zeus and Hephaestus make like that weird eye contact you do when someone like spits a baby out of their brain. And they look at each other for a second, and Zeus is like, brain baby? And Hephaestus is like, that's kind of weird. And then Zeus shakes his head back and forth, and he goes, whoop, closes back up. Have you guys ever done like those shrinky dinks you get from like a grocery store and you drop them in water and like, darn it, they grow? That's the same thing that happens here with this little murder. It starts growing to full size. And full size. Zeus does not recognize this person at all. And he's like, who are you? And this girl confronts him and goes, my name is Athena, daughter of Metis. I was born inside of you, and I have been living in you for years until I made my way to your brain, and then I decided it was time to make my own armor and weapons, and so I made a forge on your brain. And Zeus is like, that's why I had a headache. She goes, yep. And so Zeus is so excited that he gave birth to his brain baby that he ends up making her an Olympian. And because she's born from Zeus's brain, she becomes the god of
Wisdom.
And because she was making her own weapons, she becomes the god of
War.
And this is way that Zeus gets away with it. No one ever figures out what happened. Athena doesn't tell other people. She sort of keeps it a secret. And so now Hera is all impressed that Zeus gave birth to a brain baby. Zeus is impressed that he gave birth to a brain baby. All the other gods like, I wish I could give birth to a brain baby. And everybody's happy. Except for Metis, who never shows up again and is gone forever and ever. And the definition of mind is going to be your thinker. So it's not quite your brain. That's why mind was connected to Minerva, which sounds like Menospi.
First, there's also brain baby. That's not
No, it's going to get worse.
I thought if she could,
That's not even the right position, bro.
wait, so like Titans, they can like transform size, right? So if she was a gnat and he like went, and
You're
like
trying to apply logic, aren't you?
why can't she just
Try.
like?
Yeah. In a moment, we're going to kill the sky. So don't worry. It's
What
going
is
to
that?
get
How
worse.
is that?
Matei?
No way people actually believe.
What flavor body armor did that?
So
Wait,
let's
yeah, how
go
did she
to
build body armor?
all the iron in his blood,
No,
obviously.
like what flavor body armor?
When
March!
they have low iron and freaking
What
high
god does March come from?
Aries.
Aries.
Why do you say Aries?
Because it's Mars. Mars is like a
His
metal
Roman
thing.
name was Mars. Ares is the god of war. Those of you on this side over here, in case you can't see it well, that was the Ares, who's the one up there with a vulture on his shoulder. And then the dog is vultures, and dogs were often connected to him because after wars, dogs would go. Well, you probably don't want to know. And then he was also connected to vultures because they would go and eat all the little dead bodies.
Wait, I want to know.
Well, dogs like to eat meat, and after a war, think about what's on the field. And
Dead
so
bodies.
over here, he would also the one that has the little vultures behind him, and this is Ares on this one. Over here, right above where Rhaegar is where we have Ares again on that one. And in Greek mythology, he was not known as a big tough god. He was known as a wussy god. He was a bully, and he often would get into fights. He would come down to Earth, take human form, get into fights with humans, get beat up, go back up to Mount Olympus and cry to the other gods, who would then make fun of him because he got beat up by humans on a regular basis. He was not highly thought of by the other gods. If you've played the God of War game, that is not how the Greeks thought of him. The God of War game made him look all tough and strong. In Greek mythology, he was not tough and strong. He was basically the bully that tried to get everyone else to fight each other. March, there's two definitions. One definition is the month, and the other?
Stompy walk. Yep, stompy.
So, it was originally considered a war walk. As you were going off to fight into a war, the armies would march into battle, which literally meant you were doing the walk of Mars. And so, this walking that you did was to honor the war god, or the god of war, and so it was hence marching. Now, when we have marching bands, our bands don't go off to kill each other. Well, they shouldn't be going off to kill each other, but marching band originally originated here, where you would have bands playing music as you went off to go fight each other. The other definition, the third month of the year, is also connected to the god Ares. And it was thought that this time of year is when the gods fought each other, because the weather is so chaotic. It's when you have the most tornadoes, the most earthquakes, and with the water thing that goes splashy, and then those things. Those things. And so all of that, they thought that this time of year was when the gods fought each other, and so they called this time of year the time of the gods fighting, hence the time of Mars. Read.
Who's the actual god of war?
Ares. That's the actual god of war. They just didn't respect him very much. By the way, there is a planet named after him, which would be, what color is Mars?
Red.
They knew that back then, and so they thought that it was covered in blood, and so they thought that that entire planet was controlled by the god of war, hence it being completely covered in blood. Now, we get to begin our big fun stories. Looking on blue sheet, below those 10 we just did, here's where I'm going to be telling you the story today, tomorrow, and then going into Thursday. My goal is we'll probably get through the first 20 questions or so as we go through and do it. I'm not going to stop and answer each one. It's just as you listen to the story, eventually you'll be like, hey, I know the answer here. Like in theory, you already know the answer number one. It says, what was the first thing to exist? Chaos. And so we've already covered that one. So it's just as you listen to the story, more and more of this will make sense to you, in theory. So in the beginning, there was chaos. How do we describe chaos?
Everything. Pudding. Nothing is pudding.
There you go. I even found a little picture of pudding for you, for those of you who have never had your delicious chocolate pudding. And so in Greek mythology, the first thing to exist was chaos. It was the only thing to exist for, we don't know, we didn't have watches yet, but for thousands of years or maybe thousands of minutes, it was just chaos, until eventually chaos got bored and decided to create the first two beings. Those first two beings, when it splits to form, are going to be
Father Sky and Mother Earth.
Father
Or
Sky
Gaia
and
Grace.
Mother Earth. I will be pronouncing them as Gaia and Uranus, because that is the Greek pronunciations. You are 7th graders. I fully expect you to pronounce them the 7th grade way. So instead of Gaia, you are going to say, and instead of Uranus, you're going to say, and so yes, the very first couple in Greek mythology was named Gaia and Uranus. And this is where every 7th grader is like, giggle, giggle, giggle. And I've just learned to accept it and move on. That's just the way the Greeks go. So I'll call them Gaia, and then your head you'll go, and then I'll say Uranus, and they'll go, and it's all good. So we have Gaia and Uranus, otherwise known as Mother Earth, and then Father Sky. So according to them, Mother Earth was a sentient being. You could communicate with her and talk, and she could talk back.
Yeah.
She didn't really have a mouth that was like, bar, 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 but she could communicate with you. And then same thing with Father Sky. Father Sky was a sentient creature that you could communicate with. And they were the only thing to exist again for years. It was just the two of them having fun, and things were going well. Till one day, Mother Earth goes to approach Father Sky. And she goes, honey bun. He goes, yes, dear. She goes, you know how you keep calling me Mother Earth? And he goes, uh-huh. And she goes, how I keep calling you Father Sky? He goes, uh-huh. She goes, I don't think we can keep using those names. He goes, what do you mean? He goes, well, I can't be a mother if I don't have children. And you can't be a father if we don't have children. So I think we're going to need to have children. And Father Sky goes, that's a good point. She goes, thank you. He goes, what are children? And she goes, I have no idea. He goes, but I read about it in a newspaper once, so I think that we should have it. He's like, where did you get a newspaper? She goes, shh, don't worry about it. He goes, well, how do we go about getting these children? Do you find them at a store? And she's like, no. Apparently there's a class you can take at school, and they're going to explain it to you, but I've not taken that class. So instead, how about we just stare at each other awkwardly, wiggle our fingers, and yell children? And he goes, yes, that will make things much less awkward. So they decide to just stare at each other and wiggle their fingers and go, babies! And it happens. Which is why you should never wiggle your fingers at another person and yell babies, because you never know what. Hey, not in my classroom! Look at back kids all
Babies.
As soon as you guys find out the holiday business, this is where I can't wait till you guys go home. I found out where babies come from. And your parents are like, what? You're like, what's this? They're like, what? You're like, babies! You're like, what is public education today?
We can't say that.
So, Mother Earth and Father Sky have the first set of children ever born. But we've also have no idea what children are supposed to look like. So these are like practice babies. And so the first babies that are born, they come shooting up out of Mother Earth. And they are going to be the largest things ever created. They were gianter than mountains. It was thought like they were big enough they could actually pick up mountains and throw them at each other. And there were 3 of them, and they were all boys, because we've not figured out how to invent girls yet. So apparently it take more work. And the 3 of them, don't write this down yet, because it's a really big word, but they were called Hecatona Shires. I'm normally going to refer to them by other names, which would either be 100-handed monsters, because they had 100 hands, or 50-headed monsters, because they had 50 heads, or normally just big ugly monsters, because they were big, kind of ugly monsters.
Big ugly monster.
In Greek, Hecaton meant 100. Shire meant handed. So their name literally just meant 100-handed. I did research. I have tracked down pictures of what the Greeks believed they looked like. And so this is what they believed that they looked like, and these were the 3 of them. I did find they had actual names. You don't have to know them, but I've had kids ask. So they were Cultus, Gyges, and Briareus. Briareus, not diarrheas. That's a whole different issue we can get into. And so the 3 of them were born, come shooting up out of Mother Earth. All I care about is, the 100-handed monsters or big ugly monsters. The other things I just put because some kids get really interested about this stuff. So Mother Earth sees them and thinks they're the most adorable thing ever. And she immediately gives them Gucci Goos, where you go underneath the chin and you go, Gucci, Gucci, Goo! And they all like, rog, 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 and they slap their heads and things are great. Father Sky looks at them and he's like, those are her, kind of her. And he throws up all over Mother Earth. And she's like, what? And he's like, those things are horrifying. But Mother Earth loves them, as mothers do with children. And she goes, well, hon, I'm not getting rid of them because I love them. You're just going to have to turn around. So Father Sky's like, done. And he turns around and refuses to look at his own children because every time he does, he throws up.
I would too.
And this continues again for years with Mom and Dad and then the 3 babies running around, picking up mountains and throwing them at each other. The problem is, Father Sky is still not used to him down there, and every once in a while the big ugly monsters will run off the top of a mountain because, again, they're immortal and they're boys. So if you can't die and you're a boy and you have 2 brothers, what are you going to spend your time doing?
Bad things.
Yeah, those of you who have brothers, then as soon as they find, like, wait a minute, I can hit you with all 100 of my fists and you're not going to die? Game on! And so that's what they would end up doing, but it would make noise, like they would jump off the top of a mountain and be like, flying elbow, 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 and they would hit each other, then Father Sky would be like, hey, what are you, and then he would throw up. So Father Sky gets tired of this, and he goes and talks to the big ugly monsters, like, hey, children, I'm having an issue looking at you, and you keep distracting me with all of your noise, so I'm going to introduce you to something. And they're like, blogga, blogga, blogga. And he's like, I think that's monster for what is it? I'm going to introduce you. And he reaches out his giant sky hand and rips a hole in Mother Earth and creates a pit called Tartarus. Tartarus. And creates this pit called Tartarus. And he goes, look, kids, a hole. And the big ugly monsters go over and look into the hole. And they're like, what? And he goes, dunk, 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 and pushes all 3 monsters into this pit of Tartarus, making them disappear, never to be seen again until later in the story. At this time, it's back to just Mother Earth and Father Sky, and we have gotten rid of the big ugly monsters. Father Sky is happy. There is no more having to throw up. Mother Earth is not happy because her babies are gone. So one day, Mother Earth approaches Father Sky. She goes, "Hey, hon." He's like, "Ooh, I don't like that voice." And she goes, "Remember those things called children?" And he's like, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, I think the first set were practice babies. Everyone knows nobody likes the first child born. That's why you have to have a second child born." And so he goes, "All right, so what's your thinking?" And she's like, "I say we have a second set of children, but this time we're going to do much better. That's why the first one is the practice baby." And she goes, "All right." He goes, "Oh, have you taken that class yet?" She's like, "Uh-uh." He's like, "So just wiggle fingers?" And they're like, "Uh-huh." And so he goes, "All right, let's wiggle." He was like, "But if they're ugly, I'm getting rid of them. I don't deal with ugly babies." And she's like, "No one should have to deal with ugly babies." And so they do the whole little
Babies!
creepy, and it works again. This time, the children are way smaller. We're no longer going to have those gigantic babies. That was obviously a mistake. So compared size-wise, compared to the big ugly monsters, this new set of children came up to like between their kneecap and top of the shin. So it was like about that high compared to the big ugly monsters, so much shorter. Again, we have 3 of them. Again, no females yet because that takes work and they have to have like things like brains. And so we have the 3 of them. Father Sky has his eyes covered, and he was like, "Describe them to me." She goes, "Oh my God, they're adorable." And he's like, "Not buying that one." He's like, "Start describing." And she's like, "Well, they have a body." He's like, "Keep going." She's like, "They have 2 arms." He goes, "That's it?" She goes, "Uh-huh." He's like, "Oh, I like that." She goes, "They have 1 head." He's like, "Oh, I like where we're going so far." She goes, "And they have 1 mouth, 1 nose, and 1 eyeball right in the middle of their head." He's like, "Oh, that sounds kind of creepy, but I can roll with that." And these are called the
Cyclops.
And this is where the Cyclops come in, and the 3 Cyclops are born. Again, I've done research, and I tracked down what they think the Cyclops looked like.
Fat.
And these are the Cyclops that existed at that time.
green.
They were pretty adorable. See, I'm trying to get rid of those points. Again, I looked up their names. You don't have to know them, but because kids have asked, there's Argies, Brontes, and Steroides. And,
Ethiopian.
yeah.
What about Tyson?
Tyson!
He's the baby of these kids! He's the
He's got Tyson.
He's a descendant!
Oh, you mean from the...
Yeah.
Oh, he's not real.
So,
He's a son of
yeah,
Poseidon!
he's not real, unlike these. So, we now have these 3 that are born. Father Sky uncovers his eyes. He's like, "Ew, they're creepy, but I kind of like them." And he's like, "All right, I'm not throwing up." And, all right, he's like, "I think these are keeper children." And the Cyclops go, "What do you mean keeper children?" He's like, "Don't worry about it." And it turns out these Cyclops develop an ability that no other god will ever have. The Cyclops discover that they can take their bare hands, plunge them into Mother Earth, pull out rare ore, and smash them into shapes. And they immediately start crafting weapons and armor. And again, if you're a boy, and you're immortal and cannot die, and you have 2 brothers, and you discover you have the ability to make weapons and armor, what are you going to spend your time doing?
Playing Minecraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, Minecraft.
Minecraft in real life.
And so they immediately start running around and attacking each other because they figure it's fun if you can run at your brother and go, "Hey, yonk," and then chop off your brother's arm. He's like, "Ah, woo," and like, this is the best thing ever. And so they start running around and attacking each other. And Father Sky thinks it's great. He was like, "You kids have fun." Until one day, one of them goes running off the top of the mountain, and he has this classic trick where you surprise your brother by jumping off a mountain with a giant sword, and you cut your brother in half, and like the 2 halves fall apart, and you like get to laugh at him. Classic. And so he runs up to the top of the mountain. He's going to jump down and surprise his brother, and he jumps off the mountain. He's like, "Ah!" And when he does, his sword hits something above him. The thing above him being Father Sky. Father Sky thinks it's all fun and games until you stab him. And Father Sky was sitting up there just watching TV, and he's like, "Ah!" And Father Sky's arm was flying off. He's like, "Hey, who stabbed Daddy?" And all 3 of them are like, "He did." And they all point to each other. Father Sky goes, listen, I didn't mind you guys stabbing each other. That was hilarious. But as soon as you start stabbing me, I'm going to get grumpy. If you hurt me again, I'm going to introduce you to your brothers. And they go, we have brothers? And he's like, uh-huh. And you're going to meet them if you hurt me again. And so they go, all right. And they back off. Time goes by. And so one of them comes up with the idea for a spear. And he's like, the idea of a spear is if I throw it from a distance, I can pin my brother to the ground, and then when he's trying to get free, I can run up to him and chop off his arms and legs.
Oh, what?
Another classic trick. So he picks up his spear and goes chasing after his brother. And he's like, I'm going to pin him to the ground like an insect. And he flings his spear as hard as he can as his brother's going running up a mountain. But the problem is, as his brother goes running up the mountain, he does the little matrixy, whoa! And his spear goes right past him. And as it goes past his brother, it goes thunk, right into Father Sky, who's sitting up there, and he's like, ah! Is this a spear? And they're like, uh-huh. He's like, did one of you stab your father? And they're like, I'm sorry, Daddy. He's like, oh, you're going to be sorry. And he reaches out his giant hand, scoops open a hole in the ground, and the hole is called? And then takes his other hand and flicks each kid. Doink, 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 knocking them into the pit of Tartarus, where they disappear forever, never to be seen again until later in the story. Tomorrow, we're going to find out what happens with the third set of babies.
Wait, we're writing